Jane Eyre, Chapter 21. Presentiments are strange things, and so are sympathies, and so are signs, and the three combined make one mystery to which humanity has not yet found the key. I never laughed at presentiments in my life, because I have had strange ones of my own. Sympathies, I believe, exist, whose workings baffle mortal comprehension, and signs, for aught we know, may be but the sympathies of nature with man. When I was a little girl, only 6 years old, I one night heard Bessie Leaven say to Martha Abbott that she had been dreaming about a little child, and that to dream of children was a sure sign of trouble, either to oneself or one's kin. The saying might have worn out of my memory had not a circumstance immediately followed, which served indelibly to fix it there. The next day Bessie was sent home to the deathbed of her little sister. Of late, I had often recalled this saying and this incident, for during the past week scarcely a night had gone over my couch that had not brought with it a dream of an infant, which I sometimes hushed in my arms, sometimes dangled on my knee, sometimes watched playing with daisies on a lawn, or again dabbling its hands in running water. It was a wailing child this night, and a laughing one the next. Now it nestled close to me, and now it ran from me. But whatever mood the apparition evinced, whatever aspect it wore, it failed not for 7 successive nights to meet me the moment I entered the land of slumber. I did not like this iteration of one idea, the strange recurrence of one image, and I grew nervous as bedtime approached and the hour of vision drew near. It was from companionship with this baby phantom I had been roused on that moonlight night, when I heard the cry. And it was on the afternoon of the day following I was summoned downstairs by a message that someone wanted me in Mrs. Fairfax's room. On repairing thither, I found a man waiting for me, having the appearance of a gentleman's servant. He was dressed in deep mourning, and the hat he held in his hand was surrounded with a crape band.
"I dare say you hardly remember me, miss,"
he said, rising as I entered.
"But my name is Leaven. I left coachman with Mrs. Reed when you were at Gateshead, 8 or 9 years since, and I live there still."
"Oh, Robert, how do you do? I remember you very well. You used to give me a ride sometimes on Miss Georgiana's baby pony." "And how is Bessie? You are married to Bessie?"
"Yes, miss. My wife is very hearty, thank you. She brought me another little one about 2 months since. We have 3 now, and both mother and child are thriving."
"And are the family well at the house, Robert?"
"I'm sorry I can't give you better news of them, miss. They are very badly at the present, in great trouble."
"I hope no one is dead," I said, glancing at his black dress. He too looked down at the crape round his head and replied,
"Mr. John died yesterday, was a week, at his chambers in London."
"Mr. John?"
"Yes."
"And how does his mother bear it?"
"Why, you see, Miss Eyre, it is not a common mishap. His life has been very wild. These last 3 years he gave himself up to strange ways, and his death was shocking."
"I heard from Bessie he was not doing well."
"Doing well? He could not do worse. He ruined his health and his estate amongst the worst men and worst women. He got into debt and into jail. His mother helped him out twice. But as soon as he was free, he returned to his old companions and habits. His head was not strong. The knaves he lived amongst fooled him beyond anything I've ever heard. He came down to Gateshead about 3 weeks ago and wanted Mrs. to give up all to him. Mrs. refused. Her means have long been much reduced by his extravagance. So he went back again, and the next news was that he was dead. How he died, God knows. They say he killed himself."
I was silent. The tidings were frightful. Robert Levin resumed.
Mrs. has been out of health herself for some time. She had got very stout, but was not strong with it, and the loss of money and fear of poverty were quite breaking her down. The information about Mr. Jones's death and the manner of it came too suddenly. It brought on a stroke. She was 3 days without speaking, but last Thursday she seemed rather better. She appeared as if she wanted to say something and kept making signs to my wife and mumbling. It was only yesterday morning, however, that Bessie understood she was pronouncing your name, and at last she made out the words. Bring Jane, fetch Jane Eyre. I want to speak to her. Bessie's not sure whether she is in her right mind or means anything by the words, but she told Miss Reed and Miss Georgiana and advised them to send for you. The young ladies put it off at first, but their mother grew so restless and said Jane, Jane so many times that at last they consented. I left Gateshead yesterday, and if you can get ready, miss, I should like to take you back with me early tomorrow morning.
Yes, Robert, I shall be ready. It seems to me that I hope to go.
I think so too, miss. Bessie said she was sure you would not refuse, but I suppose you will have to ask leave before you can get off.
Yes, and I will do it now. And having directed him to the servants' hall, and recommended him to take care of John's wife, and the attentions of John himself, I went in search of Mr. Rochester. He was not in any of the lower rooms. He was not in the yard, the stables, or the grounds. I asked Mrs. Fairfax if she had seen him. Yes, she believed he was playing billiards with Miss Ingram. To the billiard room I hastened. The click of balls and the hum of voices resounded thence. Mr. Rochester, Miss Ingram, the two Misses Ashton, and their admirers, were all busied in the game. It required some courage to disturb so interesting a party. My errand, however, was one I could not defer, so I approached the master where he stood at Miss Ingram's side. She turned as I drew near, and looked at me haughtily. Her eyes seemed to demand what can the creeping creature want now. And when I said in a low voice, Mr. Rochester, she made a movement as if tempted to order me away. I remember her appearance at the moment. It was very graceful and very striking. She wore a morning robe of sky-blue crepe. A gauzy azure scarf was twisted in her hair. She had been all animation with the game, and irritated pride did not lower the expression of the haughty lineaments. "Does that person want you?" she inquired of Mr. Rochester, and Mr. Rochester turned to see who the person was. He made a curious grimace, one of his strange and equivocal demonstrations, threw down his cue, and followed me from the room.
Well, Jane,
he said, as he rested his back against the schoolroom door, which he had shut. If you please, sir, I want to leave of absence for a week or two.
What to do? Where to go?
To see a sick lady who has sent for me.
What sick lady? Where does she live?
At Gateshead in the Shire.
In the Shire? That is 100 miles off. Who may she be that sends for people to see her that distance?
Her name is Reed, sir. Mrs. Reed.
Reed of Gateshead? There was a Reed of Gateshead, a magistrate.
It is his widow, sir.
And what have you to do with her? How do you know her?
Mr. Reed was my uncle, my mother's brother.
The deuce he was. You never told me that before. You always said you had no relations.
None that would own me, sir. Mr. Reed is dead, and his wife cast me off.
Why?
Because I was poor and burdensome, and she disliked me.
But Reed left children. You must have cousins. Sir George Lynn was talking of a Reed of Gateshead yesterday, who he said was one of the various rascals on town, and Ingram was mentioning a Georgiana Reed on the same place, who was much admired for her beauty a season or two ago in London.
John Reed is dead too, sir. He ruined himself and half ruined his family, and is supposed to have committed suicide. The news so shocked his mother that it brought on an apoplectic attack.
And what good can you do to her? Nonsense, Jane. I would never think of running 100 miles to see an old lady who will, perhaps, be dead before you reach her. Besides, is so she cast you off?
Yes, sir, but that is a long ago, and when her circumstances were very different. I could not be easy to neglect her wishes now.
How long will you stay?
As short a time as possible, sir.
Promise me only to stay a week.
I had better not pass my word. I might be obliged to break it.
At all events, you will come back. You will not be induced under any pretext to take up a permanent residence with her.
Oh, no. I should certainly return if all be well.
And who goes with you? You don't travel 100 miles alone.
No, sir. She has sent her coachman.
A person to be trusted?
Yes, sir. He has lived 10 years in the family. Mr. Rochester meditated.
When do you wish to go?
Early tomorrow morning, sir.
Well, you must have some money. You can't travel without money. And I dare say you have not much. I have given you no salary yet. How much have you in the world, Jane?
He asked, smiling. I drew out my purse. A meagre thing it was. 5 shillings, sir. He took the purse, poured the hoard into his palm, and chuckled over it as if its scantiness pleased him. Soon he produced his pocket-book.
Here,
said he, offering me a note. It was £50, and he owed me but 15. I told him I had no change.
I don't want change, you know that. Take your wages.
I declined accepting more than was my due. He scowled at first, then, as if recollecting something, he said,
Right. Better not give you all now. You would perhaps stay away 3 months if you had £50. There are 10. Is it not plenty?
Yes, sir, but now you owe 5.
Come back for it then. I'm your banker for £40.
Mr. Chester, I may as well mention another matter of business to you while I have the opportunity.
Matter of business? I'm curious to hear it.
You have as good as informed me, sir, that you are going shortly to be married.
Yes. What then?
In that case, sir, Adele ought to go to school. I'm sure you will perceive the necessity of it.
To get her out of my bride's way, who might otherwise walk over her rather too emphatically. There's sense in the suggestion, not a doubt of it. Adele, as you say, must go to a school, and you, of course, must march straight to the devil.
I hope not, sir, but I must seek another situation somewhere.
In course,
he exclaimed, with a twang of voice and a distortion of features equally fantastic and ludicrous. He looked at me some minutes.
And old Madame Reed, or the misses, her daughters, will be solicited by you to seek a place, I suppose?
No, sir. I'm not on such terms with my relatives as would justify me in asking favours of them, but I shall advertise.
You shall walk up the pyramids of Egypt, he growled. At your peril you advertise. I wish I'd only offered you a sovereign instead of £10. Give me back £9, Jane. Have a use for it.
And so have I, sir, I returned, putting my hands in my purse behind me. I could not spare the money on any account.
Little niggard, said he, refusing a pecuniary request. Give me £5, Jane.
Not 5 shillings, sir, nor 5 pence.
Just let me look at the cash.
No, sir, you are not to be trusted.
Jane.
Sir?
Promise me one thing.
I'll promise you anything, sir, that I think I am likely to perform.
Not to advertise, and to trust this quest of a situation to me. I'll find you one in time.
I shall be glad to do, sir, if you trust in turn will promise that I and Adele shall be both safe out of the house before your bride enters it.
Very well. I'll pledge my word on it. You go tomorrow, then?
Yes, sir, early.
Shall you come down to the drawing-room after dinner?
No, sir, I must prepare for the journey.